everybody. Here we are today for Wednesday challenges teaching. I'm here today to talk about 7 life-giving relationship distinctions. And so I do counseling with individuals. I do counseling for relationships. I do marriage counseling. I do counseling between just friends, adults, roommates, you name it. I also have a passion for connection. I believe that the most important things we have in life is our connections. And so it's not just a connection in a romantic relationship, but connection in a relationship with everybody that we have in our life, and especially those that we bring close to us. So it's a passion of mine to see us connected not only to the world around us and to those that are close to us in healthy, life-bringing ways, but also connection with God and connection within ourselves. So today I want to talk about relationships and how to have a healthy one with those that are close to you. There's qualities in every relationship that need to be present in order for each person to truly experience fullness in that relationship. And one of the first ones has got to be honesty. If you can't, and that's not just telling the truth and not telling lies, that's fully showing up, being present, sharing your truth, standing up for yourself, expressing what you need, and not just rolling over. Not being afraid to speak up for yourself and say what needs to be said. And there's ways to do that, which I'm going to get into a little bit here today. It's easy sometimes to just avoid. In order to avoid conflict, I'm just going to roll over and do whatever the other person wants in order to keep it comfortable and to keep peace. But peace isn't always the best, isn't always the number one priority for connection, because if you have peace at the expense of being really honest and true, you're not really connecting. You're withholding parts of yourself, and you're not giving that other person the fullness of who you are because you're not being honest. And that can be really scary because it's not always received well. But if you're having a relationship based on what you think you should be in that relationship, or to avoid conflict, then you're not really connected. You're just existing together. The second one is balance. All too often in relationships, it can become unbalanced towards one side versus the other side, and demanding for one person more than the other person, especially in addiction situations where there's an addict in the home, or a person with unhealthy self-protection mechanisms like we talked about last week. So if usually it's two parts of the relationship that have those self-coping mechanisms that interfere with true connection, and you can't control the other person, you can only control you. So the more whole you get, the more you can represent yourself in a more full way in order to bring yourself to the table in the relationship, and not just orbit around their like a moon around their planet. And that often happens in relationships to where one person is either a stronger personality, or one person is more broken, or one person is making more demands, and so the other person will start managing themselves around that other person in order to keep things running smoothly. And that happens a lot of times in parent relationships with an adult parent, or a sibling, or sometimes friends, often in marriages and in romantic relationships where one person is unhealthy. Actually, they're both unhealthy. One person is the more dominant characteristics that the other person is just going to orbit around and take care of and manage and work around the other person. And that's where I see a lot of the issues come up with clients that come to see me, is that inability to navigate when only one person in the relationship really wants to work on the relationship. And that makes it really challenging to stay connected. And you, like I said, you can't control the other person. All you can do is make yourself healthy and get your stop trying to take care of them. It's actually not helping them. When you try to manage somebody else's behavior for them, it teaches them they don't have any responsibility. It wears you out. It teaches you that your needs don't matter. And it creates depression and anxiety in the relationship because they're constantly on your radar, and you're constantly trying to figure out how to work around them, how to manage them, and how to deal with them, and that's no way to live. So, but stepping away from that can be really scary, because what if they're left to their own devices and they don't do a good job with that? And what happens is, in that case, is then you have more choices to make and what you're going to do. Some relationships that could be the end of the road for that relationship. If you have a dysfunctional relationship with a friend like that, where you're constantly having to explain yourself, or why you didn't text, or what you meant by your text, or why you didn't come to their function, or if you have an adult parent and you're an adult with a parent I see that a lot, where a mom or a dad is making unreasonable requests of their kids and trying to control and manipulate and coerce. And the child grew up in that environment, and now as adults, I'm having to manage their behavior because they're out of control. And you probably need some good boundaries, and we're going to get into that too. So if you have more questions about that, please put it in the comments so that I don't overlook something that you need to know. Now, communication in a relationship is really important. No matter what level of relationship you have with another person, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship or extended family relationship, it's ways to communicate what do I need from the other person, and how do I communicate that in a way that goes to their heart and not just into their ears. And how do I do it in a way that their defense mechanisms don't automatically come up? Oftentimes we'll present it in a form of an accusation, like, you never do the dishes, or you're always making messes that I have to clean up. You. That's never a great way to start a conversation when you have a need in a relationship. And a better way to do it is to follow this formula, is when you, I need, I feel. Or when you, I feel, I need. I got that wrong, sorry. When you don't do the dishes, I feel taken advantage of. I need a partnership in keeping things taken care of. And then that person obviously has a choice whether or not they're going to choose to do that. And then you have new choices to make. And sometimes you have to decide what hill's worth dying on and what isn't. You can't make every issue in your relationship the mountain that you're going to die on. You have to decide which couple of key issues am I going to really stand firm on and not budge on, and which ones am I just going to learn that, well, they don't even see that the dishes are important, so eventually I'm just going to do them myself and get over myself and not be angry. But if you're doing that as a rollover to avoid conflict, and that's your normal MO, then that's not healthy. So it is important to express your needs. Like, I need your undivided attention at certain times when you're not on your phone and you're not distracted by the television or other things going on, to where you're fully showing up for me and that I have your attention. Can we schedule a time every week that we can get together and do that? And that's more in a marriage or a romantic relationship. If you have friends that can't ever give you their attention because they're on your phone, you probably need new friends. The other thing is, don't make assumptions. Oftentimes we make assumptions in our communication. Well, I don't understand why they didn't get that. I told them really clearly what I what I needed. So in that case, you might ask, what is it that you hear me saying? I want to make sure I'm expressing myself clearly, like, what is it that you're here that I need, and how do you feel about that? Which comes to understanding on their side too. So communication is how you present yourself to them. Understanding is how you listen to what they have to say back to you. And so it's curious listening. Like, okay, I don't want to jump to conclusions or come up with my next argument or what I want to say next or how I'm going to defend what they're trying to tell me. I need to repeat back, okay, I hear you saying this. Is that what you mean by that? And they might say, yes, that's exactly what I mean. And then, okay, I'm sorry that I am affecting you that way. That's not my heart. That's not what I wanted. Or you're right, I can see now how I came across to you, and that's unfair of me, and I'm sorry, I apologize. But really being curious and really listening to the other people in your life and saying, okay, what is it that you're trying to come across? Their ability to communicate with you might be a big jumble, a big mess. They don't know how to tell you what it is that they're trying to say. And so even if they're coming across accusatory or in confrontational ways, trying to understand, okay, what is it that you're really trying to tell me here? What's really going on behind all this anger? You might even, which is part of the boundaries, which we'll come to, you might even need to say, you know what, this conversation isn't going real well. So what do you say we take, 10 minutes, an hour, or a couple of hours and go our separate ways and come back and talk to you again about this at a different time when we can both have time to calm down, to gather our thoughts, to think it through. And in the meantime, it's important for you to not be building your defenses and your arguments and stewing and chewing and bolstering up your fortifications within yourself to come back at them with bigger, badder weapons. And if that's what you're doing in that time away from each other, then you're only going to cause more disconnect, which is the opposite of what you want. So you have to humble yourself, lower those defenses, and really listen to what they're trying to tell you. It doesn't mean you have to do what they want you to do, because once again, you need to be honest in the relationship, and you need to not just be what they want you to be. But on the other hand, it's important to really listen and really be curious about what someone is trying to communicate to you. The next one is vulnerability. Vulnerability means that, first of all, I accept who I am with all of my inadequacies and my issues, that I accept myself first as a person, and that I've come to appreciate who I am and to become comfortable in my own skin so that I can be vulnerable and show up in my relationships and be fully present. And that really comes from having your own heart healed and having just getting to know yourself and learning to love yourself. That doesn't mean you don't grow and become more, because obviously that's important. We always are on a growth curve, but if you're not okay with where you are today, then that's going to really mess you up, because you're going to have to put something forward and present yourself in an artificial way in order to find that acceptance from others that you're not able to give to yourself. And so you'll be presenting a false version of yourself, or a defensive part of yourself, or and you're just not going to be fully present. And people are going to pick up on that. And if you're finding a lot of rejection, that could be the case. That first you're rejecting yourself, and then you're presenting something that you think people want, and they're picking up on how that feels, that is uncomfortable to feel that coming off of somebody, and so they will resist you because of that discomfort that you have with yourself. They'll pick up on the discomfort and they'll become uncomfortable with you. And so step one for vulnerability is really loving and becoming comfortable with yourself. And I just really recommend Brene Brown's stuff for that. She's so great about teaching us to be vulnerable and authentic and laughing at ourselves and knowing that, you know, we all have our thing. We all aren't whatever perfect is. We all are whatever we are. So anyway, hi Diana, I see you saying hi there. And all the others that are here. It's good to have you here. Okay, besides vulnerability and relationships, challenge. Your close relationships, your close friends, those that you have, I think we have levels of how close we should allow somebody in to our deepest places. And not everybody gets to be there because they can't all handle it in a great way. But the people that you invite in the closest and the deepest should be those that love you and accept you in those in your weakness, in your mistakes that you make, like we talked about a second ago, but yet able to challenge you and call you out on things that you need to be called out on. I have Steve and Wendy Backlund. Some of you guys know them. They've been my pastors since 1991, and so they have free access pass. And Berta and Sue, Berta, I see that you're here too. You guys have full access to tell me and call me out on my stuff. My kids call me out on my stuff. And so I told you about that I think it was last time, the time before that, how I was not acting like my normal self, where I face a challenge and I just jump right in, and the bigger the risk, the more excited I get, until it came to my own ministry, and then I found myself shrinking back and becoming complacent, and for the first time that my kids had ever seen me like that, and they called me out on that, and that was one of the things that said, you know, you're right. I don't know why I would become complacent in this thing just because it's scary and hard. And so it's really important to have people like that who are close to you, who can challenge you in your stuff. But it has to be people who love you and value you and celebrate you too. Otherwise, they're just going to beat you down and make you feel poorly about yourself. So that's challenge. And then finally, boundaries. You can't really say yes to somebody unless you can say no. So if you can't tell somebody no, then you're not able to truly tell them yes. If you're just saying yes because you're afraid to say no, then that's not really giving them your yes. And so finding out why am I saying yes to things that I really don't want to do? What's going on with me? Well, I'm probably afraid of conflict, or I'm afraid of letting them down. I'm afraid of what they'll think of me. I'm afraid that it will break up the relationship, and sometimes it does. I'm not going to lie. When one person gets healthy, dysfunctional relationships start to have difficulty. That's just the way it works. When relationships are dysfunctional, it's codependent, and you're leaning into each other's weaknesses and brokenness, and that when one person starts to get healthy, that dynamic doesn't work anymore. And so it does put pressure on a relationship. And it's also an invitation for that other person to get healthy too. And the healthier that you get, it's always an invitation for them to join you in that health. But they won't always take those opportunities. And then some relationships you'll realize are not healthy relationships that I really need to let go of. If I'm not allowed to truly show up in this relationship and be loved and accepted for who I am, then why am I in this relationship? So boundaries. Oftentimes this comes up with like adult parent, like I talked about earlier, adult parent relationships where you grow up in a dysfunctional dynamic, and then parents start to make demands on you that are unhealthy, like trying to micromanage your choices and tell you how you should do things, or tell you that you're not good enough about things. Another one would be making their life the relationship's all about me. You're making me feel this way. You're causing me to do this or that. You don't love me. You don't invite me to events. And probably you don't invite them to events because they're not fun to be with, because they're causing problems and conflict. And so there needs to be a boundaries involved and probably some good communication, and it's not always going to be well received. And so if you want to know more about that, we can talk about boundaries. I really want to bring a friend of mine on here who's great with boundaries. I want to have her be a guest here and to share with you about boundaries. But anyway, the biggest thing to remember in boundaries is I can't say yes unless I have the freedom to say no. And that freedom comes from inside of you, not the other person giving you that freedom. There has to be a place in you that gives you permission to say no to somebody. And so if you don't have that, then you know there's something going on inside of me that I need to dig into and find out why. Why don't I feel like I can say no here? And what am I afraid I'll lose if I do say no? That's another question I often have people ask is, what will I lose if I show up fully in this relationship? What will I lose if I tell this person no? And that's really good information for us to have to learn. Oh, so I've got this lie running a background program in my mind, or I've got this fear of rejection, or I don't really feel like what I have to say is important, or I don't really believe that my needs matter. My needs never mattered in my whole life, so why do they matter now? I'm just everybody else's needs matter. I don't matter. And sometimes if a strong personality where you feel like life is all about you, and if you're not allowing other people in your life to fully show up in these 7 ways, then you know that, oh, what's going on in me, that I feel the need to control and dominate those around me and not give them the freedom to tell me no, or the freedom to tell me how they feel, or I'm always defensive when I'm confronted on something, then that lets me know that what's going on inside of my heart, that I can't handle that. So that's good information for you to take to God, take to your mentors, take to a counselor and say, so I realize this about myself, that I don't allow other people to fully show up in this relationship, and I am making it all about me. So what's going on here? And the other thing is fear. Fear, somebody asked last week about fear in a relationship. It probably depends on what the fear is. The fears that I usually show up are some that I've already mentioned. Fear of rejection, fear of being overlooked, fear of, well, what if I do present my needs and I find out they really don't care about my needs? Then what am I supposed to do? Especially in a marriage, it can feel like, well, I just found out that my needs really don't matter, and this person doesn't really care about my needs. Now what am I supposed to do? And that's where a pastor, a counselor is really important for you to go to and talk to when you get to that point and find out, what can I do? How should I posture myself? Take it to the Lord. God, what do you want me to know about this? What information do you have for me to help me here? And don't just repeat dysfunctional patterns of disappearing, shutting down, being angry under the surface, avoiding conflict, avoiding the person, just becoming roommates in a home. That's really awful to live in that kind of reality. So once again, 7 distinctions of a life-giving relationship are honesty, not being afraid to present your truth. Number 2 is balance, where both people in the relationship are equally able to show up and have their needs known and heard and understood, and it's not more one person than the other. 3 is communication. How can I present what I need from you in a way that isn't attacking or causes them to bring up their defenses. I'm not assuming that they understand what I need. Just because it seems obvious to me doesn't mean it's obvious to them. And so being able to present it in a way, like I said, doesn't just go to their ears, but it goes to their heart. Number 4 is understanding, being curious as you're listening and saying, what is it that they're really trying to communicate to me? And what is it that I'm really need to hear right now? And can I lay down my pride and my own defenses in order to really hear it? Number 5, vulnerability, and that is accepting myself first so that I can be fully present and not feel like I need to hide or present a false facade, a false front in my relationships. Number 6 is people in my life should have the people I have the closest into my deepest parts should have the ability to challenge me. So challenge me in my growth, challenge me when I'm accepting less than who I am, challenging me in things that I really need to hear, and that I receive that from them, and knowing that they love me as I am, so they're not being abusive in their challenge, but they're being empowering so that I can be my best self. Because we don't always see the things that are going on with us that can be more obvious to somebody else. And number 7 is boundaries. That you can't say yes unless you can say no. So anyway, that is 30 minutes of relationship advice. I'd really like to hear from you. If you have any questions or things that you'd like to talk about in these times, you can Facebook message me and ask me for help or for advice. And if you'd like a personal session with me where I work, one-on-one session to talk personally, then I will leave that email address in the comments. So thank you everybody for listening, and I will see you. I want to switch this to Tuesdays from here forward, Tuesdays at 11 instead of Wednesdays. So next week it will be Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. See you then. Bye-bye.